Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Woke Hollywood panics as studios eliminate DEI, focus on merit, and making money. What else is a business supposed to do other than making money? You can give people a chance. You can't change around your entire business just to try to make it grow more inclusively. Some consulting companies like McKinsey and Company want you to do that. They want you to forget about what people want, but we're not going to spend our money on things that we don't want to see. Here's a recent failure. From The Hollywood Reporter, box office Snow White in danger of poison apple. On course for $45 million domestic opening, or it could be as low as $40 million. Diversity Snow White completely failed. Disney will lose a couple of $100 million on that. And from The Wrap, experts say decision to scale back on equity and inclusion in the face of political pressure will alienate consumers and leave a hole in the bottom line. There is no hole in any bottom line. You could have a hole in a boat. A bottom line is the profit of the company. The top line is the revenue. The expenses are in the middle. What's left over? That's the profit. That's the bottom line. There's no room for holes. Today, America is more diverse than it's ever been. Well, let's see what CNN says about that. According to CNN, census release shows America is more diverse and more multiracial than ever. Yes, that's absolutely true, I'm sure. That has absolutely nothing to do with making money when you're running a business. People of color represent 43% of the total U.S. population as of 2021, a 34% jump from 2010. So it's still a minority? Yeah, according to their numbers, it is. The same goes for women, the disabled, and LGBT communities, with rapid growth among historically marginalized groups. Yet despite that growth and an audience demand for more inclusive stories, which doesn't actually exist, Hollywood studios have scaled back their inclusion efforts to mollify President Donald Trump and his supporters at the possible cost of alienating a large and growing group of customers. For them to say it's political, that Hollywood has finally realized, okay, we're losing our butts on this, we can't make any money, we've got to go back to just giving people what they want, and now they're actually just doing that. Political is why they started doing this stuff. Diversity, equity, and inclusion projects so that people with their political ideologies would feel satisfied that, yes, we're eliminating the majority race as quickly as we can from all of our productions, yet it's not what people actually want to see regardless of what their skin color or their gender or sexual preference is. So they didn't spend money on those projects, they didn't waste their time watching them if what they were about was just inclusion or trying to subvert standards like in Star Wars or Marvel. If they weren't actually any good, nobody cared about them. And they either lost a lot of money or no one paid attention to them and turned out to be a waste of money. Quote, it's a horrible business decision and certainly not the right thing to do, according to Darnell Hunt. Quote, it's very unfortunate, and of course it's a reflection of what the current administration is trying to do, rolling back decades of progress we made on the inclusion and diversity front for Hollywood in particular, according to Hunt, who co-founded the university's annual diversity report and went on to say this, quote, the majority of babies born in America today are babies of color, and the population is moving towards minority-majority status in a couple of decades. Let's just take a moment to think about this. If we're going to have majority-minority status in a couple of decades, then in a couple of decades, we ought to start making things that they like. I don't know what they're going to like. I don't know what the country's going to be like in a couple of decades. Hopefully, it will be great again. But I can't make a product and then release it in a year or 2 years or 5 years from now, based on what the population makeup might be in the next couple of decades. I don't even know what they're going to be interested in the next couple of decades. You know how much of that stuff's going to be AI anyway? AI produced content, animation, live action, TV shows, movies, you name it. So there's really no way to prepare for that. There's no way to say right now we need to make unprofitable projects and try to push them out to the public because in a couple of decades, we think the numbers might work a little different. He continues, so to not have diversity in the industry that's producing stories that need to appeal to diverse audiences is a devastating mistake. You know, when you're making content of any kind, what you want to appeal to is everybody, not white people, black people, Asian people, this sexual preference, that religion. You want everyone to see the humanity in the work that you're doing. And it's by spending a lot of money to try to produce something that's universally accepted that the studios really make all their money. Sometimes you have a small, narrow, niche-focused product that does work and that does appeal to a huge audience. That's why they work. because they appeal to more than one subset. And the industry knows this. Business people understand this. It's called economies of scale. I'm just happy to see the trend reversing because it's so illogical and they've produced so much garbage. Quote, what's happening in Hollywood isn't necessarily too different from what's happening in other sectors, according to Portia Allen Kyle, interim executive director of the activist group Color for Change. Quote, we see corporations who are primarily motivated by profit and power, capitulating and seeking to fall in line with an administration that has made very clear and transparent that they're not on board with diversity, equity, and inclusion, she said. Well, you would expect a corporation that's a for-profit corporation, which is pretty much like 99.9% of all corporations, to be focused on making a profit. Otherwise, they're not supposed to be organized that way. They're supposed to be organized as a nonprofit. If you operate a business and deduct expenses and do all those things, and you're not trying to actually make a profit, you ought to talk to an accountant about that. You're not supposed to be doing that. In many cases, those expenses are really to contribute to what's called a hobby, and they're not tax deductible. I know these people don't understand these kinds of things because they don't ever speak to those kinds of things, so I assume they don't. But normal people in business do understand we've got to at least try to make a profit when we're doing things. That kind of a social goal is for nonprofits. Go make some nonprofit movies. Changes to Hollywood's DEI initiatives have been real and immediate. Since Trump's inauguration, major conglomerates including Disney, Amazon, Paramount Global, and Warner Brothers have cut or adjusted their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, a decision experts and advocates say will ultimately leave a hole in their bottom line. They're really mixing metaphors there. That does not actually make any sense. But let's continue. As the Wrap has reported for nearly 2 years, DEI programs were already being rolled back even before the election of Trump. They do have their propaganda timeline a little bit off. This was from 2 years ago. Hollywood's diversity gains are eroding amid right-wing attacks, according to a UCLA study. The diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that are being rolled back are because of losses in court and a major loss with the Supreme Court because it's discrimination in hiring. You can't actually do that regardless of what your agenda is about doing that. And the Trump administration has said, we will pursue companies even criminally if they refuse to follow the law and treat people equally for hiring and for promotions. There's a very interesting Supreme Court case about that, and I have a video coming out about that soon. The communities being marginalized by these rollbacks are Hollywood's bread and butter. Not only are minority groups quickly becoming the majority, not so quickly, even yourself, you said it's going to be a couple of decades, they also consume more media. Black audiences, despite being only 14% of the country's population, take the lead, spending an average of 3.5 hours per day watching TV, according to a 2024 Nielsen report. The second largest racial or ethnic group in the U.S. at 19% accounts for 24% of box office ticket sales and 24% of streaming subscribers. And those are interesting numbers and they could be relevant. The issue is, are they only watching race-based content? The answer is clearly no, that's not what's going on. Regardless of your skin color or your ethnic background, you like what's good and what's compelling and what's interesting and dramatic and well done, just like the rest of everyone else. In addition, U.S. Latinos see films an average of 3.3 times a year per capita, that's per person, compared with Asian Americans 2.9 times a year and white Americans 2.3 times a year. However, they only make up less than 5% of the leading on-screen, off-screen, and executive leadership roles in U.S. media. Literally none of those things are connected. In 2021, McKinsey & Company released a report that showed Hollywood loses out on nearly $10 billion a year when it undervalues TV and film projects by Black creators. Who's this McKinsey & Company? McKinsey & Company is a global management consulting firm founded in 1926. They serve leading businesses, governments, and institutions, so they're a consulting company offering expertise in strategy, operations, and technology to help clients achieve sustainable and inclusive growth. How about plain old regular growth? Well, I'm sure they claim they can do that as well, but you see the tint there? It's inclusive. They also sell a lot of DEI consulting services. So anytime McKinsey is commenting on how you need to have more diversity, they've got consulting services that you could pay thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars for if you're a company, or even millions of dollars for if you just decide to change your company and go along with their company as a consultant. It's called talking your own book, selling your own service. Hollywood's recent retreat on DEI is one America has seen before. Between the small boost in diverse narratives and representation following the hashtag OscarsSoWhite outcry in 2015 and racial reckoning that took place after the death of George Floyd, Hollywood has long teetered along the lines of standing firm on its promise for equity in show business. Other activists the rap spoke to said while Hollywood's DEI rollbacks are disappointing, it comes as no surprise given that the promises to improve in those areas were already lackluster by their estimates. Nothing is ever good enough. You could spend millions, you could spend billions, you can fire everyone that they don't like, you can replace them with people that aren't actually qualified for their jobs, you can hire writers to do this, actors, it doesn't matter, it's never good enough, so why even listen to these guys anyway? If they're going to push DEI over quality, don't listen to them. Because us, consumers of this content, we're not going to watch things that are garbage regardless of the skin color of whoever's in the movie or the TV show. And here's the complaining. Quote, we've been dealing with a lack of representation and a lot of tokenization for a long time. And I think that a lot of DEI efforts in Hollywood were kind of hollow anyway, at least with disability and where that's concerned. According to Dom Evans, co-founder of Film Dis, a media organization that consults on disability in media, who complained about this to The Wrap. Similarly, LGBT and plus-size characters, not LGBT plus, literally plus-size characters. What do they mean by plus-size characters? According to The Wrap, it's fatties, okay? I don't mean to offend anyone, but look, LGBT, fat, and disabled characters combined only make up 10% of film roles, according to a study. Well, I mean, maybe people don't want to live vicariously through certain characters. I don't know. Write a great story with LGBT fat characters and throw in a couple disabled ones, I guess, and give them some roles. And if people want to buy that, then they'll buy it. If they don't, then they won't. Otherwise, you'll exist as characters, but you'll be in the background. That's how it's always been, and that's how it's going to be long term. And it's also important to note that's for roles in the highest grossing US films per a 2024 study from the Gina Davis Institute. I knew she made a pirate movie that did not work out so well, but I did not know Gina Davis had her own institute. Still, that's just a merit issue. If people want to see movies with certain cast members in it and they vote with their wallets, then that answers the question right there. Kyle Bowser, the senior vice president of the NAACP's Hollywood Bureau, said Hollywood is merely playing the same record it's had on repeat for years, adding that the NAACP is mostly concerned with how Hollywood will profit off Black culture. Quote, what we're most concerned about is the extent to which our culture will continue to be exploited and often even appropriated without the remuneration aid back to our community for that contribution, Bowser said. Our culture is often on the screen even when we're not, and that's been going on for decades. So this guy's actually complaining that we live in a melting pot culture that have elements that come from every community. Everyone gets to contribute their culture to a multicultural society. They can't go and say, okay, but if you use anything from my part of the culture, I need an extra payment there. Well, what about contributions from other elements of the wider melting pot? That's why all you can really do is laugh at this and tune these people out. Fortunately, even Hollywood is tuning these guys out. The origins of DEI, they claim, trace back to the civil rights movement and came about as a way to provide marginalized communities with the same opportunities that have been historically afforded to white people. From in-house diversity training to diverse hiring initiatives to pipeline programs that help fill the gaps left behind by segregation, racism, and sexism in the workplace, DEI had been around for decades. Not really, it actually hadn't. This version of it is very extreme, and it's been made to the exclusion of any fair workplace practices. It was really, really bad, and now it's getting removed. They also say, ironically, white women have been its primary beneficiary. Quote, when white women really understand their progress is tied to the expansion and the requirements for folks to look outside the white old boys network that they benefited from, it actually benefits everybody when inclusion is policy, according to Alan Kyle. One of the least nice things about these people is how race-oriented they are all the time and how they denigrate races and feel like if they do that, somehow it makes them better. It's a really ugly thing to do. It's unappreciated. And it's why these guys keep losing now. Because they had their chance, and their chance didn't work. It didn't produce good quality work. When you take gender, race, skin color, sexual preference as some kind of qualification for work, it's obvious it's not going to work, but apparently it needed to be proven again. And it was proven. And that's why these kinds of meritless projects can't get made. And I hate to say meritless, I hate to be mean, but if you're not mean, you're not on their level. You have to just tell people straight. Even with the implementation of DEI, disenfranchised communities have continued to face inequality in Hollywood. While some gains have been made, Black filmmakers still receive 40% less financial support compared to films by non-Black filmmakers. Only 1.5 out of 10 theatrical film writers are women, and white writers still make up the largest share of TV employment at 63%. If you're a filmmaker of a certain color, you've got to have a record of producing good results. You're going to get chances. Think about the director, who was a woman of color who also co-wrote The Marvels. She got a chance. She really blew it. It was a bad project. And that was after months and months of Kevin Feige from Marvel trying to fix the movie. It almost killed the entire Marvel franchise. It definitely damaged the Marvel franchise. So yes, you can be a certain skin color. It doesn't mean you're going to get preferential work or even equal work, and you shouldn't compare yourself to the skin color of the people that you're competing with. You should compare your work and the results of your work without excuses in the actual marketplace. And then you'll know what your rates are worth. It's not the skin color, it's the quality of the work. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.